Alright, now we're going to be factoring by grouping. And this is when you have like 4 different terms is kind of the dead giveaway, and obviously it's not quadratic. So let's look at example 1. You want to make sure first of all that your equation is equal to 0 first before you go any further. If it's not, then you need to manipulate your equation and make sure everything's on one side. Make it equal 0. Alright, so step 1, we're going to divide it into 2. So I'm going to, and this sign would go with the 5, obviously. Okay, so I'm going to divide this up right here. And we're going to look at x cubed plus 2x squared. And then we're going to look at 5x plus 10. Notice I did bring down this plus sign. This is not multiplication. Step 2, I'm going to factor out any GCF. So if I look at the first one, the largest thing I could bring out would be an x squared. So x squared times what gives you x cubed? 1x. X squared times what gives you 2x squared? Alright, and then in the second set, what is the largest thing we can bring out would be a 5. So 5 times what gives you 5x? An x. 5 times what gives you 10? And then you want to make sure, which it says in step 3, what's in the parentheses should be the same. So if these items here in the parentheses are not the same, then you've made a mistake. You didn't bring out the greatest common factor. Maybe you only brought out the smallest. But those have to be the same. So at this point you can do like a little check. Yes, I got the same thing. Now we're going to swoop and group. Alright, so here's how that looks. We're going to swoop these two things together. And then we're going to swoop the things on the outside together. Swoop and group. Step 5, set each factor to 0 and solve. So we would have x plus 2 is 0, x squared plus 5 is 0, and solve each one of those individually. And here we have to take the square root of both sides. Plus or minus, because I physically took the square root. We have a negative here, so we know we're going to have an I. And 5 does not break down. So we have 1 real and 2 imaginary. Notice that the imaginaries come in conjugate pairs. The degree was 3. I have 3 solutions. Negative 2. I have plus I square root of 5. And I also have negative I square root of 5. Alright, example 2. Again, we're going to divide these. And what's the greatest common factor that you could bring out? An x squared. X squared times what gives you x cubed? An x. X squared times what gives you x squared? What's the greatest common factor in the second parentheses? A 1. We're going to do our little check, make sure the things in parentheses are the same, and they are. We're in good shape. Now we're ready to swoop and group. So we're going to swoop the 2 items that were in parentheses that were the same. And then we're going to swoop and group the things on the outside together. Take each factor and set it to 0. And then solve. X equals -1, and then subtract 1 from both sides here. And then I'm going to have to have x squared equals negative 1. To undo the square, I'm going to square root both sides. So x would equal plus and minus. The square root of negative 1 is I. So remember that we had a degree of 3. I must get 3 answers. One of the answers is x equals negative 1, which is a real solution. I'll be able to see that on the graph. And then here I have plus I and negative I, and those are imaginary. And notice that they're coming in conjugate pairs again. I cannot have one single imaginary number without its conjugate. All right, don't forget to fill in your Google form. I hope you took some good notes.